Hi, everyone, curiosity to know, step into a turning point in world history. In 1493, Pope Alexander VI issued the Papal Bull decree that handed Spain the rights to vast new lands. With one stroke, indigenous sovereignty was ignored, and the path for Spanish colonization grew stronger than ever. This wasn't just a document, it was a decision that reshaped continents, fueled empires, and changed the destiny of millions. Stay with us, because this story will open your eyes to how power and faith carved the course of history. Ever wondered how a single piece of paper could reshape the world map and the fate of millions? Today, we're diving deep into one of history's most consequential documents, the Papal Bull of 1493, also known as Caetera. This isn't just some dusty old parchment. It's a story of ambition, power, and the dawn of a new global order. So, grab a seat, because this is a tale you won't want to miss. Picture this: it's 1492. Christopher Columbus, funded by the Spanish monarchs Ferdinand and Isabella, has just returned from his voyage across the Atlantic. He hasn't found a new route to India, as he'd hoped, but he has stumbled upon lands previously unknown to Europeans. This discovery sends shockwaves across Europe, and Spain, feeling the thrill of opportunity, moves quickly to secure its claim. But there's a problem. Their biggest rival, Portugal, is also a major seafaring power, and they have their own claims and ambitions. Tensions are high. A conflict between these two Catholic powerhouses seems almost inevitable. So, how do you settle a dispute of this magnitude? In the 15th century, you went to the highest authority you could, the Pope. At this time, the Pope wasn't just a spiritual leader. He was a major political player, a kingmaker, who could mediate disputes between Christian monarchs. And the Pope, in 1493, was none other than Alexander VI. Now, Alexander VI is one of history's most controversial figures. He was a Borgia, a family name synonymous with ruthless ambition and political maneuvering. He also happened to be Spanish, which, as you can imagine, played no small part in what was to come. Spain appealed to him, and in a series of edicts, collectively known as the Bulls of Donation, Alexander VI laid out his decision. The most famous of these, Caetera, was issued on May 4, 1493. It was a document that would echo through the centuries. What did it say? It drew an imaginary line down the globe, running from the North Pole to the South Pole. 100 leagues, that's about 300 miles west of the Azores and Cape Verde Islands, according to the bull. All lands to the west of this line that were not already under the control of a Christian ruler were granted to Spain. Everything to the east was, by implication, left for Portugal. It was a breathtakingly audacious move. The Pope, sitting in Rome, was essentially carving up the entire non-Christian world between two European nations. The document gave Spain the exclusive right to discover, conquer, and colonize these new lands. It wasn't just a grant of territory. It was a grant of authority, a divine mandate. The bull explicitly stated a mission: to bring the barbarous nations to the Catholic faith. It framed colonization not just as a right, but as a religious duty. This papal decree had immediate and profound consequences. First, it gave Spain a massive legal and moral justification, at least in their own eyes, for their colonial project in the Americas. Armed with this bull, Spanish conquistadors could claim they were acting not just for their king, but for God. It was a powerful piece of propaganda that fueled the Spanish Empire's expansion for the next 3 centuries. It emboldened explorers like Hernan Cortes and Francisco Pizarro, who went on to topple the Aztec and Inca empires. They weren't just treasure hunters. They were agents of a divinely sanctioned enterprise. Second, it directly led to the Treaty of Tordesillas a year later. In 1494, the Portuguese weren't entirely happy with the original line. They argued it did ungive them enough room to maneuver in the Atlantic on their voyages around Africa. So, the 2 nations negotiated, and they agreed to move the line further west to 370 leagues west of the Cape Verde Islands. This small adjustment had a massive, unintended consequence. It pushed the line far enough west to include a portion of South America on the Portuguese side. That is the historical reason why Brazil speaks Portuguese today, while most of the rest of the continent speaks Spanish. The ripple effects of this papal decision are literally spoken on the streets of South America every single day. But there's a crucial and tragic part of this story that the bull completely ignores: the people who already lived in these new lands. The document refers to the inhabitants as peoples dwelling in islands and firmlands. But it never once considers their rights, their sovereignty, or their ownership of the land they had inhabited for millennia. The bull operated on a principle later known as the doctrine of discovery. This was a legal and religious concept that essentially said Christian nations had the right to claim lands inhabited by non-Christians. The indigenous peoples of the Americas, the Taíno, the Aztec, the Inca, the Maya, and countless other nations, were rendered invisible in this grand geopolitical chess match. Their political systems, their cultures, their religions, and their very existence were deemed illegitimate in the eyes of European powers. This papal decree, and the doctrine behind it, provided the ideological foundation for centuries of colonization, dispossession, and violence against indigenous peoples across the Americas and beyond. It treated them not as sovereign nations to be negotiated with, but as subjects to be converted and conquered. It justified the seizure of land, the exploitation of resources, and the destruction of entire civilizations. This isn't just a critique from a modern perspective. Even at the time, some voices, like the Dominican friar Bartolomé de las Casas, fiercely argued against the brutal treatment of indigenous peoples, but his was a minority opinion in the halls of power. The legacy of the 1493 Papal Bull is long and complex. On one hand, it was a pivotal moment in the history of global politics, marking the beginning of European colonial empires and shaping the modern map of the world. It was a masterclass in 15th century realpolitik, using religious authority to achieve political and economic goals. It directly influenced international law for centuries, with the doctrine of discovery being cited in court cases in the United States, Canada, and other nations as late as the 19th and 20th centuries to justify the taking of indigenous lands. On the other hand, it's a stark reminder of the human cost of that expansion. It represents a worldview where one culture and one religion could claim superiority and the right to dominate others. The fight to have a new doctrine of reconciliation recognized in its place continues to this day by indigenous groups, who argue that the principles laid out in that 15th century document still have harmful effects. So, when we look at the Papal Bull of 1493, we're not just looking at a historical artifact. We're looking at a seed from which grew the Spanish Empire, the Treaty of Tordesillas, a Portuguese-speaking Brazil, and the legal frameworks that dispossessed millions of indigenous people. It's a powerful lesson in how ideas, penned on paper and backed by authority, can have a profound and lasting impact on the world, for better and for worse. A single document that drew a line on a map, and in doing so, redrew the course of human history. What do you think? How different would the world be if this bull had never been issued? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. It's a fascinating and important part of our shared global history to understand. And that was the story of the Papal Bull of 1493, the decree that gave Spain power, silenced indigenous voices, and changed history forever. But this is only one chapter in the epic tale of discovery and conquest. If you loved this journey through time, don't just stop here. Hit that subscribe button, give a like, and share with friends who love history as much as you do.